really privileged and excited to introduce Chad Ballantyne to you today. Chad is the creative director at Rhubarb Media. He's also the owner of the Creative Space here in Barrie. He's married to Sandra, who is sitting right here at the front. They have 3 children, and they worship at Harvest Bible Chapel here in Barrie. So I'm going to not steal any of Chad's thunder or story at all. We'll just invite him up. Chad, come on up.
Thank you, John. Well, it's really a privilege to be here, and thanks for Jeff, actually. It's kind of like twisting my arm to come on out. I've always found it difficult when being asked to give my testimony. I'm a pastor's son, of a pastor's son, and I grew up listening to stories my whole life. We lived just a stone's throw from New Tribes Mission when I was 8, and so we went to boot camp, and we heard all these miraculous, amazing stories of being covered in fire ants and stopping spears and eating monkey burgers and these amazing stories, and then being in ministry with following my dad around and just kind of hearing these stories of drug lords and prostitutes and just phenomenal stories, like riveting stories. And then I think about my own life when I'm a pastor's son of a pastor's son, right? And so people say when you give your testimony, it's share what your life was like before you found Christ. And I'm like, well, okay, so I was 5. How much trouble did I get into, or whatever? You're always thinking about what's the dramatic story. But the cool thing is, when you think about a life like I had, God saved me from drugs. He saved me from alcohol. He saved me from whatever. He saved me from it, and I'm thankful for that. But I still have a story to tell, and I hope that it will be encouraging to you as I share this with you. So, although I can't compete with shock and awe kind of testimonies there, I still think the story is worth telling. By grace, through faith, God saved me, and when I was 5, and I'm now 40-something. So, you can do the math, sort of. Carry 1, minus 2. But it's really, I would say it started, I had an opportunity to go to Costa Rica when I was 14. My grandma, out of the blue, just said, Chad, I found this thing online, Outreach International. I think you should check it out. Well, the deadline was about 3 or 4 weeks, and generally you take time to raise the funds and whatnot. She's like, I just think you should go to this. And I was like, okay, 14, go to a missions trip, that sounds cool. But I think that's where God really started to get my attention about who He wanted me to be. And so that's kind of where it kind of started. But it wasn't until kind of on the verge of high school, ending high school, that I really started to think about what was going to be my life, my career path. I was actually on the verge of joining the Navy, follow my dad's footsteps. And it wasn't until I met my wife, Sandra. I fell in love with a girl. I mean, that's where it all changes, right? Like, you guys are here, you have all these plans, you're going to do this, that, and then you fall in love and everything changes. So it was between her and God that I really started to head into a career in ministry. You might recognize my last name, Ballantyne, so Kai Ballantyne, pastor of Harvest in Muskoka. So and eventually I did go into ministry, so my brother and I were 3rd generation pastors, and it's pretty amazing. After 2 years of Bible school, I went to Nashville Bible College, graduating class of 8. Big school, teacher ratio was awesome. Sometimes it was just me and the teacher. But spent 2 years down in Nashville, and then 3 years, went to Briarcrest after that. In between, I got married, and we decided to head out west to Saskatchewan and continue my studies at Briarcrest. About 3 years into college, I took a year of seminary. A buddy of mine decided to snatch me away from finishing my seminary. He said, I need you to come and help me with this little church called Center Street Church in Calgary. It was a mega church. Thousands of people there. But he says, I think you should come and join me and let's build a youth ministry. And so I sent my wife, who was 4 months pregnant and an 18-month-old in the little Sundance, head to Calgary to find a place to live while I finished up my stuff in Calgary, in Saskatchewan. And so we moved to Calgary, and amazing time there at Center Street, one of the biggest churches in Canada. I don't know where they are now, it's huge, but I was the junior high pastor of hundreds of kids. I found most of my ministry was pastoring parents. And so it was just a really awesome time there, great friends. We had, it was an awesome thing. We always say we're going to go back to Calgary one day, and we loved our time there. So that was a big faith leap for us, coming from Barcrest, a young child, one in room, and no money, and kind of a half job he was offering. It turned out to be full time, but we took this faith leap. 4 or 5 years into the ministry in Calgary, God really pressed on my heart to consider what's happening with artists in churches. And so I got to spend time with a lot of creative people when I was at Center Street. I started asking questions like, hey, what are you doing with your art? Like, what does it mean to you to be an artist and a Christian and whatnot? And they really struggled. They're like, well, my art's in my basement, or I paint, or I sculpt, or whatever. And there's just this struggle of like, who am I as an artist? And I just felt a real burden to pastor artists. I went away on a conference in Chicago, and God just like kind of hit me over the head with a 2x4 and said, I want you to consider what it means to pastor artists. So that was, I don't know how many years ago, many. If you typed in, I think there was computers back then, yeah. If you typed on the computer, pastor of art or pastor of artists, you would have found nothing. And so I was like, God, you're calling me to this nothing position. Nobody in Canada is looking for someone. So we just decided to put the word out, and we eventually got a call from a church in Germantown, Maryland. So basically with confirmation from my wife and from other leaders, I resigned from my awesome, spectacular job at this amazing church, and we packed our car and we headed to the United States. Our kids were 2, 4, and 6 at that time. And another leap, we took that leap again, following that vision. And I became this new position, the pastor of creative communications at a Cedar Church in Germantown, Maryland. About 40 minutes from DC, a little bit of an hour from Baltimore, so you can understand where that was. 2 years into this 3-year visa, so I had to have a visa as a Canadian citizen. I found myself, again, kind of at this crossroads, and this is kind of recurring. You're kind of getting this story, right? Like, I'm not frustrated, but I'm just like, God, what is it that you truly want to do, and what's new that we can do within, church ministry or whatever? And I just found myself kind of on my face, like asking God, like, what's next? Met with a fellow artist in the church, and this new vision kind of came to me that eventually was called Paradox. So Creative Paradox is a ministry that we launched. I'm a Canadian citizen in the U.S. I started a not-for-profit. You can do it in the U.S. We launched this ministry, and it was for artists, Christian artists that wanted to be vocational. Okay, so it's not just artists who are Christian and they're dealing with their art and want to do stuff in the church. These are people that wanted to create art and not Christian art. It's just art. And they wanted to dance and act and sculpt and sing. We realized that within the church, the corporate church body, there wasn't really anyone really ministering to these people. If you were an artist in a church, traditionally you'd be asked to join the worship team, right? Or paint something Christian-y for our ministry. So it was more around evangelistic art, right? And a lot of these Christian artists, they're just like, I'm an actor, or I'm a dancer, or I'm a model, or I'm a writer, and I just want to write awesome stories. So Creative Paradox filled that gap. And so we took another launch off a cliff. I had a 3-year visa, so halfway into it, we decided that we would switch from being a pastor of creative communications at this church to being a pastor of artists within that community. The church that I was in graciously said, hey, we'll support you a little bit, and you can stay here, and we'll actually hire you to do some stuff for us. So there was a good little runway for us. 9/11 hit. You guys remember 9/11? Sniper attacks. I don't know if you recall the sniper attacks down in Rockville. We were down there during all of that. Seeing the smoke from the Pentagon kind of close, right? So we launched off this cliff after 9/11. Homeland Security, all these other agencies not knowing what they're doing and confused. We got some really bad advice. We stayed past our visa. Yeah, don't do that. just saying. Don't do that. So after that bad advice, hopes that we could stay and the ministry was growing and we had lots of community people wrapped around us with Paradox. We decided to head to the border and re-enter with a new visa. So that was the plan, my plan, or the plan. After 15 hours of pleading at the border, we were denied entry. So 3 kids, wife, myself, a van packed as much as we could. Ladies who said, you broke our law, and I was grilled like I was a terrorist at some points. But basically, you can't come in. So we were denied access. So we left our house. We bought a house down there when we moved. We left some amazing friends. We left a vision that I felt God had called me to. We left it all. We couldn't get back in, right? And so we were just stuck. So driving north from the border, after telling our kids we're not going home, there were some tears. I had some time to reflect. Driving, I love driving, so driving is a good time to think. We left the border, head to Barrie. We passed a giant white cross on the side of the road. So if you're coming from Niagara, you might remember this cross on the side of the road in the vineyard area. And it was like God was just saying, you know what? I love you. Okay. Thanks for that. Nice words, A few miles down the road, as the sun was setting, beautiful sunset, it's like God was saying, I'm in control of all this. Look around, I'm in control of all this. And so, although I was looking for really hardcore answers and can we figure this out or what's going on, all that God gave me was those 2 things. I love you, I'm in control. And when we got home, that was the message I had to give my family. Dad doesn't know what's going on. And we landed at Sanders' mom's place in Barrie. So I was in her mother-in-law's place. And the message was, hey guys, God loves us and He's in control. And we kind of stayed there in a funk for a few months. No job, no home of our own. Ministry I left, still going, but it was basically pulled out from under my feet, it felt like. Over the years, I picked up some design skills, graphic design. And so I knew, until the Lord's going to give me the next vision, I got to do something, right? So I'm like, get a job, Chad. And so a guy hired me to do graphic design for a new advertising company in Barrie. And it was a great opportunity, great pay. It was kind of like a runway for us. We're like, oh, this is awesome. We get our kids in school. We eventually sold our house in the States for $1 gazillion. So it was a time when the bubble was like as tight as it can get, and then it crashed. I don't know if you remember that time, but we sold our little dinky townhouse for more money than I could ever think of. And we were able to pay debt, we were able to buy a house, so we settled. We kind of were in Barrie and we settled. And just really asking God, what's next? After about 8 months into this job with this company, I kind of saw things not going well, and I decided I'm going to just start a company myself. So I launched a company. I don't think we called it anything at that time, Ballantyne Design or something. In the basement of my wife's mom's house, we started this little company. One of the first projects was Emmanuel Baptist Church new brand. So we branded Emmanuel Baptist Church. We had a lot of relationships with the local church community, and so that was. And I had a relationship with Paul Turner, who actually went to National Bible College as well. So kind of things circled around, and kind of things just sort of took off from there. I started to see a potential new career path. All the way along, I'm like, God, what's the next ministry opportunity? When are you going to call me back to ministry, right? And all the way along, it was like he's saying, I'm taking you there. Like, come along with me. And so we started this new career path in creative industry. We soon set up our company called Rhubarb Media, and we're now in our 11th year, working with companies big and small, from local coffee shops in Barrie to working with the United States government, branding their GI Bill and creating artwork for an entire NASCAR race. So it's just amazing where God has brought us through that business. A few years into Rhubarb, working in our house, we decided to move downtown with a friend to create some space for us to start an agency. A year or so into our 3-year lease, he got an awesome job, and I was left with the full rent. So here I am with this 1,100 square foot, beautiful space. If you're familiar, 89 Dunlop Street, Swirlies. You guys been to Swirlies? So that's where we were in that area. It looks nothing like what it does now, but that was where we were. And I had to kind of take stock and go, like, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to break the lease. I can't afford the full rent. And so, because of our relationship with our contractors and freelancers, I just kind of put the word out there. Does anybody want to keep me company for a little while? Like, it's pretty lonely in this space, and we're working on some projects together, so why don't you come in? So people started to come in, and then I thought, and they're like, hey, we can pay some rent if you want. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, this is a great idea. I thought I came up with this awesome, like, hey, we're gonna like work together collaboratively. And of course, I go online and Google's like, it's called co-working, dummy. So like, adopt it, and I did. And a little while later, we incorporated the creative space, and we're in our 8th year now, the creative space. This is where I feel like my two worlds collided. So half of my life as a pastor, minister, church, discipling, teaching, and this business world. When we formed the creative space, it was kind of an aha moment of like, I'm not just hanging out here with my staff and designing stuff. There's this other people out here now, and I'm supposed to sort of take care of them, right? And it was just a neat moment where I was like, oh, this is the next step. This is the ministry that you're calling me to now. And so we became a safe place for small businesses to land. And the environment and the vision was all based around community. And it was like, this is what business and being a Christ follower should be. Like, we're doing work, but we're also doing life with other people. So we tried to create the creative space as a place that emulated who we are as Christians, and just to take care of people. And we've been doing that for 8 years. So I started to see my role, not as just a businessman, but rather a new version of who I was as a pastor. My challenge to myself, and I guess the challenge to you all here, was to become the conscience of the community. As you think about Barrie and the city you live in, there's all kinds of things we do and see and hear. I felt like, how can we make an impact in the business community? And I think through the creative space and that entity, we're at the core, we're at the heart of the city, right at 5 Points. We're a center, people come and do events there. And every time people walk in, and we hear it all the time, this place just feels awesome. Like, there's something about this place. On and on and on. I just feel like we have an opportunity to make a change within our community. But it really starts with changing our thinking about helping others, and it starts with changing about how we think about money as well. So Rhubarb Media is known as a community give-back company. The more we make, we try and figure out if we can give more away. And our success, we're really focused on our success. We want to make as much money as we can because that increases our percentage of what we can do to give back to the community. And so that's where success is important, because if we fail, we can't be in a position to help. So I can share Christ, with my coworkers. But these days, nobody trusts anybody, let alone Christians, right? And so it's important that, as Jesus said, they'll know you're a Christian by your love, right? And true religion is taking care of the poor, right? And so I started to think about what we can do as a company, Rhubarb Media and the creative space, to emulate that. So we started to get personally involved with our community through Rhubarb Media, sponsoring organizations like the Pregnancy Resource Center, the Berry Food Bank, Leslie Center, and we started to get involved in that way as much as we can. Aside from all the charities and social arts, culture, events, and companies that we sponsor, we pour our lives into the creative space. We could never have done that without the success of Rhubarb. So God's been positioning us to help our community. Over the 8 years of being in community space for small businesses, I have been able to share Christ. I have been able to pray with coworkers. And most of the time it was in times of crisis. They would just come to us and go, "You guys pray, right?" I'm like, yeah. And we would love on them. Just love people and provide that place of safety and care. So in closing, I think we have to think about the legacy that we want to leave behind. Start at home, obviously, but start with your business as well. Empowering our families and our staff to believe that we can never be great by ourselves. Personal greatness or business success is not measured by the bottom line, rather by the quality of life we make possible for someone else. And that's been our mantra of our business and our lives, is we need to make it possible for others to feel Christ's love and be cared for. It starts with giving our time and money, but ultimately the quality of life we long to make possible for those in our community is the abundant life that only Christ can offer. So we use our business, our lives, our home as a conduit to share Christ to our community. That's the story. So I know it's a little bit shorter. We have some time left for questions or anything. Is that okay, Don?
Where did Rhubarb come from?
So I get asked that all the time. So Rhubarb Media, we wanted to come up with a one-word name company that evoked story and memory. So those of you in the room that are marketers, you know that that's the best form of marketing, something to evoke story and memory. So, and we love Rhubarb. My wife is amazing. She makes jams and jellies. And so we thought, let's just do this. We actually found the name of Rhubarb on the back of a plate one day and just saw it, like, that's our name. And we tested it with people going, "Hey, what happens when I say the word rhubarb?" And people were like, "Oh, I love rhubarb." And they would start telling me stories and they would salivate. And some would be like, "I hate rhubarb, let's change the subject." Like, it was such emotion around that fruit or vegetable, right? Like, so we knew that was going to be our company name. And it sticks. Anytime people think of rhubarb, they think of us. So it's kind of good. But it fits with our story. Our tagline is "Your story well told." And so that's where the name came from.
I had one other question. Sorry to dominate. In a retail space like you've got downtown, this retail space is pretty expensive. How is it co-opt through the group of people that are there? And are there ever times when there's shortfalls to the point where you could use some outside help? I just asked.
Yes, there's always time for a shortfall. Since we opened our doors, shortfall.
It's a ministry, you say.
Yeah, so it's a membership-based collaborative, so people pay membership to use the space. We don't advertise that we're office space for rent or desk space for rent. We talk about it as a community of collaborative people doing life together. So rent pays a big, membership pays a big part of our costs, meeting space, and some events, and we do events that we get some sponsorship, cash sponsorship. But in our 8 years, I think our last 5 years, we've not been sustainable, right? Yeah. So so the success of Rhubarb, so we've invested. The Bank of Ballantyne has invested. We've had a couple other members offer some support throughout the years, and it's a touch and go time. So that's
Space, a non-profit organization.
It's a for-profit community give back company, we call it. We decided to be incorporated as opposed to not-for-profit. One, because I came out of the not-for-profit world, and there's awesome things about it, and there's things that are just not so great. We wanted to be sustainable and not rely on grants and funding to build our programs. Maybe we should do not-for-profit. But that's kind of where we're at now. We're a social entrepreneurship, social innovation company. We want to challenge, other for-profits to act like us, to be like, hey, you can be in a corporation but act like a not-for-profit by just giving and sharing and whatever. But yeah, we're in it. We're in it 8 years now.
So you're also known as Catalyst for being a coach or spurring on entrepreneurial initiatives. Can you tell us a bit about that? Explain your strategy.
Yeah, so we've initiated what's called Startup Barrie, which is part of Startup Canada, and a huge part of the success of all the companies that are in the space is mentorship. We offer peer-to-peer mentorship every day. You can walk up to a desk. If the headphones are off, you're open. And so that happens every day. Companies in our space have started with 1 employee, and they've grown to 5, 6, and moved out. So it's a true incubator. It's along the way. There's no program. So that's kind of we do it along the way. But our focus is entrepreneurs and startups. So the ones and twosy companies, that's our niche. But like Rhubarb Media is a member of the space, so we have a staff of 6.
Chad, that's interesting. You talked a little bit about giving back to the community and the more you make, the more you give. Do you do that like on a tithe basis, or do you do it on a matrix of percentage, or how do you come up with those numbers?
My whole life has been by the seat of my pants, and I'm not an accountant. Our goal was that we would have a percentage that we would give every year, and so as our revenues increased, we would be able to see that would be the percentage, so that would increase as well. I don't measure it. As people come to me and say, hey, can you help us out with this thing? I'm like, yeah, okay. So, but we're here and we're successful. And so we're doing something right with Rhubarb and how we're doing it, but measuring it, yeah, not so much. Not a good advice. Just say, do metrics, yes. Anybody else?
Thank you for coming today and for sharing with us. And it's great when we come month by month like this to hear all the different stories, to see the way that God uses so many different folk and how He uses us. Whether we got that shock and awe background or not, that's not what matters. It's where our heart is now and what He's using us for out into the community. And we're glad you're here and we're glad you're part of it, that's for sure. And I don't know what happened, but last night my wife said, something's come over me. I said, well, you all right? She said, I'm fine, but I'm going to make a rhubarb pie today. She did, so I guess that's what I've been salivating the entire meal. Anyway, a little plaque for you here. It says, strength, I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by God's grace, I will do. And we think that's you. Thank you.
should get a commission for selling this. This is the book that changed my life about 13 years ago now. And I want to give Chad a copy because I have a sense for the little bit I've gotten to know about Chad. I don't know him well enough personally. I'm looking forward to that. And I'd like to talk to you more about maybe helping with the space somewhere. But this book, if you're in business and you think you grew up in a church environment or something and then somebody told you you're a second-class Christian, if you're in business, you should be a missionary or a pastor. No offense. This book tells you and I as business people, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're anointed to be in business, whether it's radio, whatever it might be. On the street, where's Kevin? Pastoring downtown. Sean is with Georgia. Keith's got a camp. There's people here doing everything you can think of. And I know for sure there's going to be at least 2 lawyers now. All the jokes I've heard, I know 2 that'll be there. But if you'd like a copy of this book, see me later. But this copy is for Chad, because I really feel that you are anointed for business. Great journey. Thanks for sharing. Just one last request for next month. We have the speaker, Doug Covington. And Doug is the Vice President of Royal Homes, major home building organization. He's going to be here. He's a owner, VP. And so we're looking forward to that. April, 2nd Wednesday in April. And if you don't have connection with us, you didn't get an email, somebody told you you heard it on life, make sure I get your card or some connection afterwards so we can put you on the email list. And again, I want to thank Scott for the support life has given us. I've never timed the commercials, but I think if I did, it'd probably be a second or 2 longer sometimes, or more than it should be, but maybe not. They seem to be well packed with the kind of enthusiasm we need. So Barrie is a great, great place to be alive today in the midst of a screwed up world. Barrie has so much going on for Christ. So thanks for being here. Hope you'll come back, and I hope you had a good time. And by the way, if you didn't pay, make sure you pay. Except for our speaker this one.